All right, Gator fans, we got another special treat for you today. Neil Blackmon with Saturday Down South and Florida Basketball Hour. You were such a hit last time. We had to bring you back. TJ and I had this conversation before we recorded. We're like, we wonder how basketball will do on the channel. And it did really well. So I'm very excited that our football fans are also huge Hoops fans and fans of yours. Thanks for coming back. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so before we talk about the tournament, you predicted UF to win it, the SEC tournament.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you take a victory lap in a moment, but did they even surprise you with just how well they were able to run through the tournament?
Yeah, I was really surprised at the way they controlled the Tennessee game. And I know everybody's going to kind of point to the Alabama game and the 20-point win. But I do think the Grant Nelson injury affected that game a little bit, particularly in terms of rebounding. Nelson was playing very well and then just didn't play in the second half when Florida kind of pulled away. Florida led for 35 minutes against Tennessee. Just for some perspective, the most they had trailed in any other game against someone that wasn't Florida this year was 20 minutes. So obviously they trailed for about 40 minutes against Florida and Gainesville too. So something about these Gators that gives them some fits. But I was very surprised, especially because that was a partisan crowd. There were the Gators traveled really well to Nashville. Shout out to all the Florida fans that I think about 3 weeks ago started following this team. And it's sort of a testament to how, no, I mean, it's a testament to how long it's been since Florida had a winner in a big time sport that they traveled that well to Nashville. But they were anyone with reliable transportation in the state of Tennessee managed to find their way to that building.
Right, for sure.
And so Florida to be able to do that really did surprise me.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the game got close a little bit at points in time, but really was there ever a moment in that game where you didn't feel like Florida was going to win it? Because I never felt like it was in jeopardy.
No, there was one time where I think it was 67-62. They cut it to 5. The place was going nuts. There were some Tennessee fans hugging, which led to some fun text exchanges with friends about how like only Tennessee fans hug down 5. But
Right.
In any event, like Walter Clayton Jr. hit a 3 so fast after that happened that any worry that I did have just evaporated.
Okay, so let's switch gears, talk about the NCAA tournament. Number 1 seeds are 154-2 versus 16 seeds. 2 of those wins did come in somewhat recent history, though. So what is the concern level for UF here against Norfolk State?
Just that they have really athletic, front court players, and they're bigger than a lot of 16 seeds. Like this isn't some 16 seed from some small league that is sort of a high level academic institution that plays like Yale, maybe, right? Like Norfolk State, they're top 100 in rebounding. They can really rebound the ball, and they have a couple guards who are electric in transition. Christian Ings is a guy who I think really could have played at a higher level, and he chose to go to an HBCU. So more respect to him for that. But, I think he has what's going to be dunk of the year at the ESPYs. And so he can get up and maybe if those guys get transition opportunities and they start to get confident, maybe then you're a little worried, but I'm not terribly concerned about the Gators. What I think will happen is maybe Norfolk will get a couple plays that'll make you say, whoa, and Florida will win by 20 to 25 points.
Okay, so let's say the Gators win in round 1, which I am not generally a look ahead person. I don't love that, but I feel like you kind of have to with the games moving as fast as they move in the tournament. So we've got UConn and Oklahoma, 8 versus 9. Let's say UFC's UConn in round 2. What are your early thoughts there? Guys, if you're jacked for the NCAA tournament, make sure that you are fully outfitted in Gator Gear. There is no better place to stack up than Alumni Hall. They have the largest and the best selection of Gator Gear for basketball that you can find anywhere. They have top brands like Nike, Jordan, Cutter and Buck, and more. You can shop their elite selection on Archer Road in Gainesville. I was just there last Friday, guys. The store is jam-packed of good stuff. Or if you're not in Gainesville, you can shop at alumnihall.com. Order right now so that you can have your gear before UF's deep run in the NCAA tournament. You want those SEC championship shirts? You can get them there. This is seriously the only place I'll buy my Gator gear. It's where you should be buying all of your stuff too. And so let's say you're good to go with your hoops outfits. They also have a great selection of basketball and football gear as well. Make sure you are decked out in orange and blue gear from Alumni Hall.
Just that I think Florida fans have a lot of PTSD as it relates to UConn from the last great Gator basketball team, who lost only 3 times, and 2 of those games were losses to UConn. So what I'd point out is that the reason that Florida lost those games is that UConn had Shabazz Napier. They had an electric point guard who was probably the best point guard in the country. This year, Florida has the best point guard in the country. He's just been named a consensus All-American, Walter Clayton Jr. So I think, obviously Florida has a huge edge there. And UConn went back to back, but the heart of that was Tristan Newton, their point guard. And it was Donovan Clingan, their big center, who made it so hard to score at the rim against them. Both those guys are no longer there. They signed Aiden Mahaney from St. Mary's out of the portal, and he was a top 5 portal pickup. He has not played well. So their best player is actually a true freshman named Liam McNeely, who went to Montverde. So Florida people should be familiar with the Powerhouse program. He's a bucket. He can get 20 to 25 points in a game, but they don't guard particularly well. They especially struggle to guard the perimeter, which is a real problem when you play a Florida team that has the best guards in the country. It's just not a great matchup for UConn. That said, so we don't sound like we're being terribly dismissive of them, they are coached by Danny Hurley. He's a 2-time national championship winning coach. And Todd Golden made the joke the other day. He said, I don't know how many people have 1 seeds who people are picking to win their brackets, and their head coach has never won an NCAA tournament game. So certainly Danny will probably have something cooked up for Florida, and I would expect UConn to play very well if that's Florida's opponent. I just think Florida has too many answers to all the questions that UConn will ask.
It's so interesting to me that you focused on Florida's elite guard play, because I was watching ESPN this morning, and one of the things they were discussing was essentially that there was kind of the consensus that the secret sauce to doing well in the tournament is elite guard play, and that's kind of what it boils down to. So if that's the case, that is something that Florida has an edge over almost everybody else, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to see a team. Let's, assuming for the sake of this discussion that they get all the way to the Elite Eight, they won't see a team that has guards that are comparable to their guards. In fact, the closest such team would probably be Oklahoma, who they could play in the second round, just because Oklahoma has a lottery pick in Jeremiah Fears, who is very good, and then they have some shooters. But even Maryland, who I think is the most dangerous team in Florida's bracket in terms of just how they match up with Florida, I would say they have a great point guard, Jacoby Gillespie, who Florida talked to in the transfer portal process and liked. But the strength of their team is their front court, their lottery pick, Derek Quinn, who's a forward, and then Julian Reese, who is just an absolute fiery competitor. Like, he's the kind of guy that you hate if he's not on your team, but you love him when he's on your team. And he's Angel Reese's big brother. It gives you a little idea into what his personality is like.
Okay, that is hilarious. That is great insight, actually. That's kind of all you needed to say for me to paint that picture. Let's go back for a second to Oklahoma. As you mentioned, if Oklahoma beats UConn, then Florida gets Oklahoma in round 2, as long as the Gators win, as opposed to UConn. What are your early thoughts there? Obviously, you have mentioned that they have some guards that are at least somewhat comparable to what Florida's bringing to the table, but how else do they match up?
Yeah, not well. I mean, their front court, their best front court player is Sam Godwin. He's going to enter the NCAA tournament hurt. Porter Moser said today they expect him to play. And Moser, in all due, big respect to him for saying, I don't know if he's 100%, but he's a senior. He's going to gut it out.
Yeah.
And he's not even, I don't think he would crack Florida's rotation in the front court, but he is a player who can rebound and gives them a little bit of size. They'd have to outscore Florida They've played at a very high level in the last, really since they got blown out by the Gators. They have played quite well. They should have won at Ole Miss. Ended up losing that game. I thought they played very well in their SEC tournament contest. Obviously, lost at the buzzer to Kentucky. So they're a good team, and they have a Final Four coach. I mean, the thing that strikes you about the West region when you kind of look at it from 1,000 feet above is
Sure.
that there are like multiple national championship winning and Final Four coaches in the regional. So I think in that respect, Florida will play teams that are prepared.
Mhm.
Um, and you'd expect that in March, but yeah, that would be your concern with Oklahoma would just be that Florida shot the ball very well against them the last time. If Florida had a cold shooting night, maybe Oklahoma could outscore them.
Do you have a UConn Oklahoma preference? It kind of sounds like maybe you do.
Yeah, I mean, so to me, it's just I'd still rather play Oklahoma, even though I think they have the guards that can kind of match up with Florida, largely because UConn is the two-time champion, and a 64 team NCAA tournament is a one-game season. So like, UConn to win one game with their coaching staff, I certainly think it's possible that they could beat Florida in one game. If they played 7 times, Florida would win 4 out of 5. But one time, who knows?
Thoughts on UF as the 4th overall number 1 seed? We talked about this going into the SEC tournament, and you kind of told us that you think these are basically kind of set prior to these tournaments happening, and you weren't sure how much of a role it played. And I think the way we saw it play out, maybe more with Auburn than even Florida, that ended up being exactly accurate. That the outcome of the tournament maybe didn't change the seeding at all. But is it a big deal that Florida was the last number 1 in, or are fans kind of just looking too much into that? And it doesn't really matter. Just play your game, win your schedule, and your path is there.
Well, it's a little bit of the second one, Allie. It's also unfortunate that I thought Florida should have at least hopped Houston, just purely based on pretty much every factor the committee says that they think is important.
Right.
And it's not obviously Houston is awesome. I mean, I think this is the last time all 4 1 seeds made the Final Four was 2008. I think there's a really strong chance. I would say better than 40%. That's pretty strong in gambling terms for this, that happens here. I think these 4 teams are above and beyond better, including St. John's. Probably those 5 teams are better than everybody else. But Florida had 2 marquee wins that were better than any win Houston had. They had a winning record of against common opponents with Houston. 2 of Houston's losses were to teams that Florida defeated. And I know Houston won their conference tournament and they won the Big 12, but Florida won its conference tournaments, finished second in a better conference, and was higher in all the predictive metrics than Houston was. Florida should have been the number 3, and most of the bracketologists who are very good, of that group, I would not include Joe Lenardi. They had Florida as the 3 and were very surprised. And it's more evidence that conference tournaments don't matter. And I don't think we'll ever get to like an opt-out situation like we have in bowl games, because obviously there's an NCAA tournament to play afterwards.
Sure.
But it does beg the question of like, these conference tournaments matter because you're playing for a championship. But, beyond that, like, what do they matter for if the committee's not going to care?
Yeah. Yeah. I was somewhat surprised to see Auburn over number 1 overall, just looking at the last, couple weeks of Auburn. Okay. So I want to ask you just kind of big picture question about Todd Golden. What are your thoughts on him doing this, like this season in 3 years at UF?
Yeah, it's amazing. I actually watched one of your shows that you did about Todd in the Title IX stuff too, and I think it's important to note like that this staff and these players were operating through that mess early in the season too, which makes it I think even more impressive. Sure. That they could handle sort of all that outside noise, and in this case, probably the likely inside noise of having this type of investigation affecting your family and your friends. But for Todd to do it in 3 years, it's really a testament to how sort of modern and forward thinking a hire this was, which again, like having someone who, and I'm sure you agree, as someone who covers Florida athletics, modern and forward thinking is not typically a word that
Do
I get
we
to use
use
very
in these
much.
years? Right.
Yeah, so we'll take it. But I think, he's a guy who understands how rosters have to be built in the modern age. He also uses the analytical tools, which tell him like that players that, other coaches might want to pursue. Florida didn't pursue certain players. John L. Davis is the best example of just how astute and savvy and smart this staff was. So John L. Davis was the number one player in the portal. Um, and he really liked the idea of going to play at Florida. His coach at FAU was Dusty May.
Mm-hmm.
And Florida was involved in talking to him. And in the end, they settled on his teammate, Elijah Martin. And the reason they settled on his teammate, Elijah Martin, wasn't because they thought that John L. Davis couldn't help them. It was because they felt like having a ball dominant player who needs the ball a lot and needs to shoot a lot, like John L. Davis, would be less good a personality fit for what this program needed, which was defense and
Yeah.
somebody who could complement Walter Clayton. And so they spent their NIL money on Elijah Martin. Well, that worked out pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And so it's just the ability to kind of make these decisions in an era where increasingly, I think, and we're even seeing teams hire general managers now. Um, you
Yeah.
know, if your head coach can also function as your GM and he's not just there to draw plays on a clipboard, then that's a great thing. And Todd is certainly that.
Is that the equivalent of like being your own offensive coordinator and head coach?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's almost it certainly is almost better. Todd has two coordinators. That's all I'll say.
Okay, let's pivot back to the tournament one more time. You did mention Maryland, and that they are probably maybe the toughest team in UF's path to the Elite Eight. Are they the roadblock? Are they the biggest hurdle to making the Final Four in the Gators region?
I really think so. Look, for me, they are hot. Bart Torvik is an analytical tool the committee uses. It's a computer database that can tell you how hot a team is entering the tournament. That you can track their efficiency numbers over, say back to February 1st. So Maryland back to February 1st is a top 10 team. So maybe they're even underseeded a little bit.
Okay.
And then the other thing to know about them is that they also track the best starting fives in college basketball. And Maryland's ranks third behind Auburn's and Florida's, and actually a little ahead of Duke's. So now Maryland only plays 6 players. They play the Crab Five. That's what they call their starting five. And then one guy off the bench. They don't have much depth. And I think the logic would be that Florida would wear them out. Potentially in the second half and maybe get them into foul trouble. But the thing is, Jacoby Gillespie, I mentioned him, their point guard. If he takes care of the ball and doesn't turn it over, they have the guard play to kind of stay with Florida, and then they have the 2 stars in the front court, one of whom will be a top 10 pick in the NBA draft, that can put pressure on Chinyelu, Hanlockton, Tommy Houck, and Alex Condon. And that Sweet 16 game, I think, could be the toughest game that Florida plays in this region, as long as they, take care of business this weekend.
All right, you did it in the SEC tournament. You want to call your shot here and pick a winner for the NCAA tournament?
So I have stuck with my guns most of the year, and I'm going to continue to. I'm picking Duke to win the NCAA tournament. I love their depth, and I think Cooper Flagg is the best player in college basketball, and I think they'll beat Florida in the national championship game. But you know what? I would say a run to the national title game would be something to be really proud of in year 3 for a 39-year-old head coach.
I know. It makes me feel like I haven't accomplished that much in my life here, sitting there as essentially the same age. Okay, so who would your other side of your Final Four be? Who would?
Yeah, so my Final Four is Houston, Duke, Florida, and then Michigan State. I have Michigan State as the only non-1 seed getting to the Final Four.
All right, Neil, we appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can follow you on social media and listen to your work, read your work. Everybody wants to know where they can find you.
Thanks, Ellie. And I'm hoping you're back on Twitter soon too. But I'm at NW Blackman at Florida BB Hour is our podcast Twitter as well. So listen to Florida Basketball Hour. Make sure you go over there and subscribe. And yeah, my work's at Saturday Down South, football, baseball, all kinds of SEC stuff. So yeah, thanks for having me again.
All right, we appreciate it. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe we'll make a really deep run and then we can have you back to talk championships. That would be pretty cool. But I appreciate you so much. You have a good day.
Thanks, Allie.